Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
And good Tuesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather tonight. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can find observations, satellite pictures, as well as watches and warnings for your area when they're issued at weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov. Find us on the weather info line at 800-472-0391. Of course, you can find us on Facebook during the day. NWS Alaska is the place to go there. We've posted some interesting information about avalanche danger setting up across south central parts of Alaska. As you find us on Twitter, you can also check NWS Alaska using the hashtag AKwx, and that helps you join the conversation with the rest of Alaska and the world about Alaska weather in general. And on YouTube in the afternoon, if you go to NWS Anchorage or NWS Fairbanks, you can get the daily afternoon map briefing, where we would have talked a little bit about the winter storm warning for the western tip of the Seward Peninsula and the St. Lawrence Island seacoast. Around the Bering Strait, there's been a lot of wind lately. Those winds still continue, and we expect those to be blowing tonight from the north and east about 35 to 50 miles per hour. Gusts, though, could reach up toward 60 miles per hour. That's blowing snow around. Not a whole lot of falling snow, but the blowing snow is going to reduce visibility, and we expect that threat to remain higher than normal until about 6 o'clock in the morning. So a winter storm warning for the western tip of the Seward Peninsula through the Bering Strait and out toward St. Lawrence Island until 6 o'clock this morning. Or tomorrow morning, I should say. Out across the Bering, another wave of low pressure is working its way up across the North Pacific and into the Gulf. This is going to be our rest of the week weather maker here. In the meantime, another wave of moving the eastern Asian coastline. All the while, you have winds slowly turning around, another wave of low pressure sitting out across the central and northern Bering Sea, and that's helping to keep those winds fairly strong up across the western tip of the Seward Peninsula and into the Bering Strait. Out around the Gulf of Alaska, you can see quite a bit of dry air, though, but a very sharp contrast to that sitting right over southeastern Alaska. Periods of snow yesterday and now into rain for most areas for the villages there, all the way through Juneau and into Haines, where at about 600 feet is where we expect that snow level to remain. Out across south central, probably going to deal with more heavy rain around Cordova. We've seen a pretty decent shield of rain all the way around the north and eastern Gulf Coast. And across south central, it's possible that we'll see freezing rain changing into snow sometime after midnight for areas around the Anchorage Bowl and into the Turnagain Valley. With that, wouldn't be surprised to see maybe some light accumulations in the Anchorage Bowl. It could be upwards of 1 inch by the time it's all said and done. So not a whole lot of snow there, and still dealing with a little bit of milder weather that's preventing a lot of really good snow formation for now. As you look out across the Tanana Valley, out toward the Alcan border, a nice chunk of dry air is working its way northward. Had some milder temperatures there around the Tanana Valley, all the way southward toward Healy today, where those winds moving over the higher terrain help to generate temps in the 30s and 40s. Not the case down across some of the lower terrain, of course. And just a wealth of clouds and scattered snow showers from time to time. Nome, as of today, has about 10 inches on the ground from some of those scattered snow showers, and of course a better snowfall from time to time. But just some passing snow in places like Bettles has brought your snow depth up to about 11 inches now. So snow is piling up in some places, just not all places at this point. Here's a look at the weather map now. We have low pressure out across the central Bering. That's at 973 millibars on the south end of that. Another circulation at 985 millibars. It's got some colder air dropping southward there and another wave developing just to the north of that. The winds on the backside of this, as usual, are a little bit stronger, and we're seeing much higher seas out here across the western Bering as a result of that. Look for gales to be possible as we head into the next couple days for the central and western chain. And low pressure out across the northern Gulf, really pushing in some of that moisture into the eastern side of Prince William Sound and Cordova and places out toward Yakutat. Yakutat today picked up about a ½ inch of rainfall there. Looked like the Seward area picked up about a ½ inch as well. Cordova was closer to 1 inch today, about 3 o'clock. The rain was really coming down. Around the central and southern parts of southeast, any snow that you were looking at was reported as rain late this afternoon. And blowing snow across the Arctic coast. Those winds still howling around, and with low temperatures this morning, the actual temperature down to about 29 below in Wainwright today. That wind probably wasn't helping much at all. Barrow made it to 13 below for the high temperature today. And frontal boundary just sitting just along the Brooks Range and south, trying to trap some of that stronger east to westerly flow out across the higher terrain, and then of course the north side of the Arctic slope. Low pressure sitting across the northern Gulf will keep a shield of rain across a large area of the north Gulf Coast. Southeast still looking at rain and better chances of snow, once again a little bit higher than 600 feet. West of Nunivak Island, a 978 millibar low. They're still channeling the tremendous amount of air moving across the eastern sections of Siberia and west of the Bering Strait. That could bring snow all the way down to St. Paul and the central and northern Aleutians just south of that. So probably not looking at a really great chance of snowfall just yet. But just to your south, that second circulation is working into the Gulf, and that's going to be pushing some warmer air north of the Alaska Peninsula. And as it does so, you'll probably catch some rain and snow at times in places like Cold Bay and Falls Pass. Better chance a lot of that's going to be rainfall at the village elevation. Now, just a little bit higher up, though, the mountains could pick up quite a bit of snow. South Central is looking at a better chance for snow during the daytime tomorrow, especially in the morning. It looks like some areas around Anchorage, the Chugach, into the valleys, we'll be looking at some snow showers, so plan for that. Rain and snow showers for parts of southeast tomorrow. Again, the very wet weather and southeasterly flow continues for you, and another surge of warmer and wetter airs lifting into the Gulf. Meanwhile, look at the contour lines across the north. Those are relaxing or spreading out a little bit. Instead of being very tight and clustered together like they are right here, they're kind of easing somewhat. And as a result of that, the wind should lessen gradually through the daytime tomorrow. So as far as the northwestern coast goes and down toward the western Seward Peninsula, conditions for wind should be subsiding slowly and easily as we get into Thursday and Friday. But they're still blowing and drifting snow. If you're out on the ice, you're going to experience some of those gustier winds, especially some of that around St. Lawrence Island and westward toward the Gulf of Anadyr. Low pressure there at 987 millibars. And out to the west, another circulation is getting closer to the western chain. That's going to spread out and really focus a lot of its energy kind of south of the Alaska Peninsula. So we don't expect this right now to just plow into the southern Bering as of how things look right now. That's a 970 millibar low south of Kiska and Attu, and another circulation just a little bit further east of that will spread some rain and clouds into the central chain. South Central is looking at periods of rain and snow showers generally south of Anchorage toward Kenai, and a better chance of rain mainly for the coastal areas around Cook Inlet, though some of that could mix. And periods of rain and snow showers around King Salmon and Dillingham. Probably a better chance for snow around Dillingham and points north toward the Kuskokwim Valley. And we'll see a few scattered snow showers across the north slope. Many along the Yukon Valley, though, will at least get a glimpse of the sunshine during the midday hours, of course. Scattered clouds generally north of Fairbanks. Fairbanks itself looking partly sunny for Thursday with a stronger circulation in the Gulf and waves of warmer air trying to wrap in on themselves. That will keep the winds gusty and probably upwards around gales for many across the central and eastern Gulf. And closer to Kodiak and south and west, we'll see pockets of heavier wind. And again, the low also wrapping in on itself, so this will kind of ease as we get into Friday and Saturday with a better chance for coastal precipitation and inland considerably drier weather. Here's a look at the temperatures then this afternoon. 30s and 40s for southeast. Places like Sitka made it to 39, about the same there in Juneau. Haines and Skagway in the mid to upper 30s. Yakutat was 38. Down around Haida Gwaii, temps there in the lower 40s toward the Dixon entrance. Prince William Sound saw ratings in the mid to upper 30s, generally from Valdez westward. Around Cordova on the much warmer side of that low pressure, and boy was it wet on that side as well, up to 40 degrees this afternoon with an inch of rain. 29 around Anchorage, low to or upper 30s I should say for Seward and Homer, 34 in Kenai. Talkeetna and Squetna were in the 30s today, 9 in Glen Allen, 1 below around Northway, 36 above though for Eagle. So a considerable change there with the positioning of the wind. Saw temps around 40 in Healy, 30 in Fort Greely, and then down below that, much colder, 16 above in Fairbanks. Tanana was only 10. As you look up toward Fort Yukon, we saw similar conditions there. 3 around Old Crow. Around Anaktuvuk Pass, it was 11 below, 15 below in Barrow. Wainwright saw temps down to 13 below, 3 below for Kaktovik and Prudhoe Bay. Dead Horse and Kaparik area was about 10 below earlier this afternoon. Teens and 20s for Kotzebue Sound, Kivalina, about 16, 21 for Kotzebue, 25 in Nome, with about 10 inches of snow on the ground. It was 7 in Galena, mid to upper 20s for parts of Norton Sound, including Unalakleet at 25. Grayling saw temps in the 20s, 16 in McGrath, and it was 24 in Bethel. With Bristol Bay temperatures a little bit above freezing, we're still looking at readings there about 34 for King Salmon and Dillingham. Most of the Alaska Peninsula, including False Pass, Cold Bay, and Sandpoint, all in the upper 30s today. Around the Pribilof was just above freezing by a couple degrees. St. George was 35, Unalaska and Dutch Harbor about 38 there, 36 for Atka. Adak was only 28 though, and 35 in Shemya. Your temperatures tonight, mainly in the single digits and teens for the interior, 0 for Fort Yukon, 15 below in Barrow, 18 above in Nome Southwest, looking at 20s and 30s there. Low to mid 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, a little bit below freezing out in the chain tonight. Southeast, mid to upper 30s, south central, 20s and 30s with Kodiak Island in the mid 30s. High temps tomorrow closing in on 40 there. South central may see temperatures go just above freezing once again. Low to mid teens for the Tanana Valley, 5 in Fort Yukon, 13 in Tanana. And looks like most areas on the Arctic coast will be at or just below 0, anywhere from probably 0 to about 10 below should be a good rule of thumb. 25 in Nome Southwest, upper 20s and lower 30s. The Alaska Peninsula just a hair below 40 degrees, mid 30s for Adak and Atka, and upper 30s to lower 40s for Southeast tomorrow, 40 in Yakutat. Watch for areas of IFR across the Brooks Range, generally to the south side though, so Amblers probably to about Bettles or so. Off the Chukchi Seacoast, you'll see some IFR, and from Nunivak Island to just south of Hooper Bay and Ammonok, looking at an opportunity for IFR. Otherwise, just real patchy MVFR conditions across the eastern Gulf and south central, as well as more widespread areas of MVFR across the Bering. Here's your pass conditions. We expect MVFR in Anaktuvik Pass. IFR on the north side, you'll see similar conditions for Adigan Pass throughout the day. Expect some improvement for Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, starting out at IFR and then hoping for some improvement through the day. Rainy Pass, MVFR conditions, looks about the same there in Windy Pass. Marginal conditions there, and the same goes for Isabel Pass. Ventasta Pass right now looking VFR throughout your Wednesday. Tanita Pass should head that way throughout the day. Porter's Pass, some improvement should be expected. There will be some MVFR in the region. Hopefully it's not right over the pass tomorrow. And Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect that to be marginal through most of the day. The freezing levels, well, the surface freezing line continues to run fairly far north right now, up around the St. Matthew Island waters and over southwestern Alaska. The 2,000-foot freezing line aloft is hugging southeastern's coastline and then hovering right over the central Gulf at this point. Otherwise, everything is sub-freezing in the morning, as it should be for this time of the year. Tomorrow's icing potential has light to isolated moderate across a large part of the North Slope and the Alcan border down into the Copper River Basin. Some higher threats there across the western Brooks Range out toward the Chukchi Seacoast, also south and east of Sandpoint along that frontal boundary and south of Kodiak. All of that's above 5,000 feet there. And warmer air out across the Bering Sea. You'll still have to climb fairly high above St. Matthew and south of St. Lawrence Island for that light to isolated moderate threat, also above 5,000 feet. The jet stream shows a pretty active pattern here. We've got several circulations of low pressure traveling along in the jet there. One of those well south, and that's what's continuing the surface low pressure system and that train that's working its way toward Alaska, coming in on the jet stream around 150 knots from west to east. High pressure is trying to establish itself up across the northeastern coastline, not doing such a hot job right now. It's mainly low pressure that's driving our active weather situation across the Bering and across the northern Pacific. At 9,000 feet, you can see stronger winds here from 40 to 50 knots. More of a southerly flow working across most of Alaska at this point, about 15 to 30 knots there. Northeasterlies cruising in on the north side of low pressure across the northern Bering. That's giving us those stronger winds at the surface through the Bering Strait. And for southeast, a south and southeasterly flow aloft at 9,000 feet. You see your winds around 15 to 35 knots or so. Considerably stronger winds the closer you get to this low pressure system across the central and western Gulf. Otherwise, we're still looking at a southerly flow working across the mainland of Alaska. Easterlies crossing the Bering Strait at 30 knots, and you can see our winds starting to recover here just east of the next storm moving out of the North Pacific. Wind speeds there are already up to 55 knots. So turbulence potential, we're going to see conditions probably worsen across the North Pacific and across the northern Gulf especially, some of that reaching occasional to widespread moderate, starting to encroach on areas around Kodiak tomorrow, probably around the Barren Islands and just south of Homer, around southeastern Alaska, west of Sitka, looking at areas of chop developing and probably worsening below 10,000 feet in a wide area of light to isolated moderate along the Bering Strait and mainly under those areas of faster moving winds. That's a look at your aviation forecast. In a few moments, we'll be back with a look at your ice edge and an update for the Cook Inlet. Stay tuned.
2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. Water. A drop can indicate coming rain. A mist can be refreshing. A river can power an entire community. The ocean can inspire awe in all of us. The forces of nature that create waves also create an inviting opportunity for wholesome entertainment. But on almost any beach in the country, the waves that come crashing ashore could also hide a dangerous and deadly force, the rip current. Few natural events are as powerful as rip currents. The rip current is the coming together of several different forces just a few feet from the beach. First, a sandbar appears offshore. Waves that would normally not break until hitting the beach instead break on the sandbar. The water from the waves is trapped by the sandbar and cannot move naturally back to sea. This creates water that funnels a fast-moving current away from shore. In that short time, anything or anybody caught in this flow of water can be pulled out in the current. That is where the danger comes in.
When a person gets caught in one, maybe they don't even know they're in one, but what's going to happen is they're going to find themselves getting further and further away from shore. If they find themselves in this situation, the first thing they need to do is not panic. That's the #1 rule, don't panic.
Even the strongest and most skilled swimmers can get caught in a rip current. Nationally, more than 100 deaths a year are attributed to rip currents. About 75% of all lifeguard rescues are rip current rescues. Swimmers can find themselves in a hopeless situation if they don't recognize the signs of a rip current and know how to escape its grasp.
The rip currents are fairly slow to form. It depends on the shoreline. Some areas they're very persistent in one place, and other areas they move around all the time. In most beaches, they're not dangerous or present most of the time. It's only under fairly brief periods of time where they really become a threat to people and swimmers.
By knowing the different forces that cause a rip current, you can tell with some certainty where one is flowing away from the beach. But even with that skill, it's always good to swim near a lifeguard station and check with the lifeguard to see if a rip current exists where you plan to swim. The first sign is the sandbar offshore, where you'll see breaking waves in a shallow area. If you see a sandbar, start searching for the other elements that make up a rip current. If one exists, you'll see water and sea foam moving through breakers and farther offshore. You'll then see different colored water beyond the surf. The water will actually highlight the narrow currents.
There are a lot of subtle indicators that a rip current is present and that it may be a threat. Some of those indicators are more turbid or dirtier water that shows up with farther outside the surf zone particularly. You see it out beyond the breakers, and that's a good indicator that there may be a rip current present.
Rip currents can occur anywhere along the shoreline. Swimmers should be especially cautious around jetties or piers. But there is one warning sign that will leave you with no doubt. When you see warning flags, which can differ in look and style from beach to beach, it means one thing: don't swim. The rip current can kill.
The red flags are there for your safety. Each morning, each one of the beach patrol services on the Outer Banks has a supervisor who gets up and checks the water conditions. If we feel like the water conditions are such that are a danger to your personal safety, we put the red flags up.
Ultimately, there may be a time when you become caught in the rip current. If you're caught in a rip current, the one key rule to remember is to not swim against it. Swim parallel to the shore. You'll either swim out of the current or swim until the current itself dissipates.
A lot of people think that when they're in a rip current, they can't get back to shore, and that scares them. And they think that they can't get back to shore where they are and also all up and down the beach, and that's not true. It's just maybe 50 yards wide where the rip current is. If you swim parallel 50 yards one way or the other with the beach, it doesn't matter, then it's a lot easier to swim back to shore.
Most rip currents dissipate after about 50 to 75 yards. Then you can swim parallel to the shore. Do not hesitate to wave to get help. Drop by drop, the ocean's water is enjoyable, powerful, and at times can be dangerous. The beaches of the Atlantic are some of the most beautiful in the country and provide enough physical challenges and pure fun to enjoy without risking your life by swimming in a rip current. Study the facts and be careful. Parents should make themselves aware of the conditions of the water before letting their children swim. And when children are swimming, parents should keep a sharp eye on them all the time. We want you to enjoy your time in the waters of the Atlantic. But before you do, check the conditions. Make sure no rip current or any other dangerous conditions exist by checking with the lifeguard.
I think the best thing that people can do is always find out where the lifeguard stand is, swim in front of the lifeguard stand, and when you get onto the beach, before you get in the water, walk up to the lifeguard, ask them, are there any problems with the water that day?
When you come down on vacation, you just really need to be smart about the ocean. Speak to your lifeguard, and by understanding is your best defense against this ocean, and understanding can be talking to that lifeguard.
Swim with a buddy, swim in your ability, and don't take chances. We want everybody to come down and have a good time and leave safe.
It's an easy thing to do, and when you are sure the water is safe, the ocean will be yours to cool off in and enjoy for years to come.
All right, as far as Cook Inlet goes, we've been waiting and waiting to see some ice forming, and now it's forming. The temperatures are finally getting cold enough there, but we've got about 5 to 7 inch thickness, or 5 to 7 coverage, I should say, across the Knik Arm, and some pockets there just west of Hope and south of Anchorage there in the Turnagain Arm. But other than that, not a whole lot of ice is forming there in the Cook Inlet. Not the case across the west coast. So as you look at the Bering Strait all the way down towards St. Lawrence Island, we're getting some shore-fast ice there, and ice forming south of the Bering Strait and along the southwestern coastline all the way out toward Nunivak Island and filling in through the Norton Sound area and increasing in thickness now. However, we've got that low pressure system that's working warmer air up to the north, and we'll have to see how that works with the developing thickness of the ice there. But ice is coming, and of course it's just about the end of the year, so very timely. As we look at across southeast, northerly winds coming out of the Lynn Canal will develop through the morning hours there. So as we get into the afternoon, this is what you should expect. Northerlies about 15 to 20. Southeasterlies inside of the Clarence Strait at 25 knots. And offshore winds generally from the coastal areas looking at 25 to about 30 knots with a developing southeasterly flow outside of the Dixon entrance with 11-foot seas. A big change though for Thursday as low pressure works up. Gales and storm force winds develop. Look for 40 to 50 knot winds along the coast, east and southeasterlies there. Seas up to 21 feet in some of the higher areas there, generally west of Sitka. Northerlies are also increasing to gales across the Lynn Canal and down through Stevens Passage, 30 to 40 knots. Southeasterlies bringing seas up to 7 to 11 feet in the Clarence Strait for Thursday. For South Central, light south and easterly breeze across the north and western Gulf. Inside of Prince William Sound, that's 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. North and easterly winds coming down Cook Inlet around 10 to 20 knots, the strongest of which will be west of the Barrens. A variable flow inside of Shelikof Strait with a 4-foot sea expected there on a 15-knot wind. That picks up, though, to 30 knots from the north and east on Thursday. North and easterly winds also coming down the Cook Inlet a little bit faster, 20 to 30 knots. Northeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound and 35 to 40 knot winds across the north and western Gulf by Thursday. Gales there on the eastern side of the Barrens with a 23-foot sea. For Wednesday, easterlies inside of Bristol Bay, look for a 5-foot sea there. East and northeasterly winds on the North Pacific side with seas around 11 to 13 feet. For Thursday, northeasterlies still running around 25 knots with a 5-foot sea. Easterlies a little bit further down the coast, and a north and northwesterly wind on the North Pacific side, 15 to 18-foot seas there for Thursday. For the Aleutians, a west and northwesterly wind will continue for the afternoon. Look for 15 to 30 knot winds east of Atka with seas around 13 to 14 feet. West of Nikolsky, considerably lower seas there around Unalaska to Nikolsky. Across the North Pacific, 20 to 30 knots with a 10 to 14-foot sea. And not across the west, look for winds to turn more to the east and northeast as you get into Thursday. 30 to 35 knots with a 10 to 13-foot sea. 9 to 10 feet seas for the central and eastern chain on the Bering side, and 10 to 12-foot seas for the Pacific side as we get into Thursday afternoon. As we look at the west coast, freezing spray is going to be an issue anywhere close to the ice edge. Look for 25 to 35 knot winds in the north and winds running around 20 knots in the Kuskokwim Bay, 8-foot seas there, 9-foot seas around the Pribilofs on a southwesterly wind up to 20 knots. That becomes a little bit more light as we get into Thursday and variable with that as well. 6-foot seas are expected. Northeasterlies coming offshore all the way up to Hooper Bay. 3 to 5-foot seas are expected by Thursday afternoon, and easterlies blowing across the St. Lawrence Island waters. 8-foot seas there where the sea ice has not come in just yet. Freezing spray again, still a threat. For the Arctic coast, east and northeasterly winds will be the rule, the strongest of which have shifted out toward Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. So look for gales there with ice covering the entire amount of the coastline there. Look for 20-knot winds inside of Kotzebue Sound. As we get into Thursday, those winds become a little more northerly with time, but still holding on to some stronger winds there west of Cape Lisburne. But you can see winds around the Arctic coast generally still running about 20 to 30 knots in most areas with that northeasterly flow. Recapping tonight's weather, a winter storm warning continues for the western tip of the Seward Peninsula and out toward the St. Lawrence Island seacoast, where the winds are still pretty strong. That's going to be blowing the snow around, creating poor visibility and making travel a little bit more difficult than normal. On top of that, we expect gusts upwards of 60 miles per hour from the north and east. Wind speeds sustained around 35 to 50 miles per hour. So be careful if you have to be out and about tonight. It's probably not the best night. A frontal boundary lingers across the north, and new storms are working into the Gulf, keeping things active for the coast. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.